Thank you. And thank you for inviting us to this seminar. We're very happy to be here and to share ideas together with you. Anna-Maja and I have decided that I will talk first, and then Anna-Maja have her speech. And in the end of those, we would like to have the questions.
Okay.
So if that is okay. What kind of future citizens do we foster in Nordic early childhood education? Is there a common Nordic perspective on values in early education? These were some of the questions that is grounded in our study, Values Education in Nordic Preschools, Basis of Education for Tomorrow. And as you can see, it's quite a large project. It involves 27 preschools from the 5 Nordic countries. It involves around 450 educators, around almost 2,000, and children are involved in one way or another, and a lot of researchers. And you can see the collaboration partners here. And what we wanted to know is to try to find out the fostering of children in early childhood on different levels. We wanted to look upon it from theoretical level, methodological level, and empirical levels. And the key concepts are values and values education. It's very interesting to read from previous research that values and values education is a neglected area in early childhood all around the Nordic countries, even though it is highly stated in curricula in all of the countries. This is an area which the educators feel is difficult for them. And when we talk about values education, this is also interesting in a Nordic context, because values education is a concept internationally well known, but not that well known in the Nordic countries. And it is actually about the practice in early childhood where the intention is that children should learn about values. It could be formal, informal. It could be planned for, or it could be just lived out. And when we talk about values, it's about principles that guide ourselves in our behavior, and also towards we often evaluate what we are doing. It's about qualities in actions of good and bad, positive and negative. And of course, they are socially constructed and negotiated. We have used some theorists for inspirations, but all through the project we have inserted different kind of thinkers to help us to understand this complex issue. And of importance is that the project is built on participatory action research methodology, which in turn is also built on values. It's a value of respect for the educator's knowledge. It's a value of respect for the educator's ways to treat values in early childhood settings. We didn't impose any program. We tried to challenge and support what was going on in the preschools. And we worked on different levels here. The Nordic level, which is very complex, like we have heard before. How can we say that something is Nordic? We worked on the national levels, we worked on the preschool community levels, and individual and practitioners and children's levels. So today, I will first try to draw together some of the results from the sub-studies and also our Nordic studies. And I must maintain that this is still, we are working in the analysis process. So here are some, we present some tentative ideas here. And also try to look upon what can this mean for early childhood educators. And Anna-Maja will give an example of a sub-study, a Nordic one, what is going on in a dressing situation. When we started the study, we based the study on certain values. For example, democracy values, caring values, and disciplinary values. And that was because of our previous studies that indicated that these values were important in early childhood settings. But we also wanted to extend that idea to look for various different values that might turn out and be important in the studies. And so we were open, and we included also competence values, self-enhanced values in this field. But during the project, we could also identify certain values that wasn't on our map when we started. And it refers also a little to the previous discussion, the value of individuality and the value of efficiency. And I will come back to this. Just to give you a brief idea what were the values about, because all these value fields were going on in the different preschools. Ethical values or caring values is about the concern for self and others. Democracy values is about being a person in a community, having rights and responsibilities. Disciplinary values concerns the order in preschool and a lot of rules. And self-enhancement values can be connected both to the democracy field, but we have pointed it out as a special field here. It's about the individual's possibility to express oneself, to be listened to. When it comes to efficiency, this is about the effectiveness of the organization. The organization must function. And when it comes to competencies, those values can be connected to the other value fields because it's demanded from children to express different competencies if we refer to caring values, for example, or democracy values. And then the idea of the individuality. It seemed to us as a very important value for practitioners is to encounter the individual child. So how does this look if we try to look across the different countries? In one of the papers we have presented, we looked at curricula and the different curricula in the different countries. And we found some, it was quite a simple analysis, but we found some differences. And also, to a certain extent, those differences were mirrored in interviews and in our observations of the interactions going on. For example, competence values in Swedish curricula were very common. When it comes to caring or ethical values and democracy values, we could also identify some kind of difference here. And we can ask ourselves, is this a difference and why is this happening? For example, democratic values appear to be more, at least on a discourse level, more prioritized in Swedish context compared, for example, in the Finnish context or in the Norwegian one, where caring values appear to be significant. And we don't really know what is this going on? Why is this? Is it that caring values perhaps is so taken for granted in the Swedish context that I don't talk about it? Or is it a difference? And can this mean that something different is developing here in the different cultures? When it comes to values of efficiency, it seems to force the educators into actions they didn't really want it to. It seems to force them to leave, for example, democracy values, because the system must function. The organization must go on. It could force them to leave their caring values because of the organization. In one of the papers were written, it's a Swedish paper about gender issues, it appeared that gender neutrality was some kind of ideal. And in another paper, a Nordic one, where we looked at conflict situations to analyze rights from the perspective of children and educated, it seems that the communication from the teacher's point of view were based on an idea of a rational person. Children were addressed as rational persons, able to take decisions, able to respond, but it seemed also that they expected a similar action from the children. This is something interesting. Yes, I think, and in this also, in the communication of values, it appeared that the values, the educators directed them a lot to the individual child. Democracy could be about individual rights, for example. And it seemed that there was a strong focus on the individual child, and the educators really struggled to share their care in equal ways to each of the children. So there's something going on here. How much time do I have, Anna-Maja? Okay, thank you. If we turn over to the educators, what do they tell us in this project? They tell us about their personal and professional change. They mean that during the project they have changed. What is also an interesting result, if we look at previous research, they tell a lot about educators lacking concepts for values. And we could also find that. But we can also see how embedded values are in the context, in the interactions, in the ongoing life in preschool, which make values difficult to verbalize and to put concepts into it. It explains a bit this lack of language for it. But what happened during the project was that the educators describe how they experienced that they had developed a common language for values. They had created some kind of collective and communicative space. They point to the importance of the collective, of being together, analyzing together. They point also to reflection tools for values. For example, as using narratives, everyday practice stories to analyze values, or using videos of their own actions to analyze values. We could also see how the project visualized the significance of the leadership. Without leaders in ECE settings, driving, inspiring, giving space for values education, the discussion will fall down. Leaders are significant. So values education, from a practitioner perspective, is being in between. It is a matter of pluralism. We have earlier today talked about the new society, the pluralism of values in all our Nordic countries. The pluralism is also about values can be differently interpreted. There is not one way to work with values. There are a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways to understand theoretically values. So the pluralism is important. For the educators, it is to be in between the individual and the collective, to make decisions, to analyze, to take positions where you have to measure or relate the individual child towards the collective. And it appeared that the individual were more prioritized than the collective. But this was not a total pattern, but it's some kind of indication here. It is to be in between theory and practices. It is to be well known of concepts for values, for example, of research on values, to think about values and reflect about values. But it is also to reflect about practice and to do values in practice, like our practitioners talked about. Now we have talked a lot about values. Now we want to do the values, we say. And it's a dialectic here. And it's also to be between the personal and the professional, because values address your own person, your way of living, your ideas, the whole life. But it's really important to take the step over to being the professional, working in an institution for education with curriculum to follow, with your position as a well-known educator. So there needs to be a balance here. And it's also a challenge to be between clarity and uncertainty, because there are, as I indicated before, there are no single roads here. Values are something that we have to interpret, negotiate all the time. And it's important also to think about, it's not to say that it's a pluralism, it's not to say that everything is relative, it's not total relativism. Of course, there are values that are important and that we don't want to give up. Just a short summarization here. Values education, a matter of pluralism. It's to be in between the personal and professional. Values are implicit, embodied, and difficult to verbalize. A need for a collective communicative space to develop a language, identify and prioritize values. Various theoretical and methodological tools for values are needed. We have an extended picture of the value fields. Caring and democracy might have different focus according to a different cultural context. Efficiency creates clashes towards other values. When it comes to gender, perhaps there is some kind of rationality and masculinity that is dominating. Needs to be investigated more, I must say. And a strong focus on individuality leads us to further questions. When it comes to efficiency, can it be that values connected to production, efficiency, and strategic goal orientation are becoming more important values in ECEC of today? The balance between efficiency and other values in ECEC is a significant dilemma for teachers to reflect on and an important issue for research. Both individual and collective-oriented values are, of course, important in early childhood settings. The study implies that collective values are marginalized. If this is correct, we need to ask ourselves why this has happened and on what grounds, but also to scrutinize how such values may be recaptured and reconstructed in ECE settings. And further questions. How are values and values education addressed in national policies, in teacher education in the Nordic countries? How can this area be strengthened? How could the student educators be prepared for encountering a diversity of values in early childhood settings? How to support practitioners' work with values? Is the realization of caring and democracy values possible in a time of emphasizing effectiveness? How to create preschool as a cultural meeting place for collective relationship in a time of individuality? How to balance between personal and professional values? Is there a common values basis for a Nordic pedagogy? Values education in ECEC is not only about today, it's about the future. We can ask, What kind of societal competencies and values are children expected to develop in preschool, and what kind of future society can follow? In today's pluralistic societies, values are more than ever being actualized and confronted. This calls for educators and researchers to develop high-quality knowledge on how values are lived and communicated in early educational settings.